been listening to half of that music for months, and it's just so amazing when they put it together. I really loved it. Evie and Rick, yay. I'd like to welcome everyone here. It's a beautiful night, and thanks for coming. Thanks to all the people who made this financially possible, and to Marcus for the sound, and Mickey for beautifying the space, and to Jen for this lovely flower arrangement. If you get bored with me, you could look at that. That'd be good. Am I forgetting anyone? Musicians? Okay, we're going to start off with the Voice of Youth. We have a program called Wellspring of Imagination in the fall. And last year it was an exceptional program. And there's a young man here tonight that I met at the Poetry Out Loud 2016 championship. And he won. And he recited for us last year. And he went to Wellspring in the fall. And he's back, and he'll probably say a few things about himself, but he's just doing fantastically well at school, and it's just a privilege to have him here. Thomas Ellison.
Thank you. Good evening. It's fun to be back out here. Me as a young person, technology is a soul of my life, and out here, I've lost my soul. However, it's always fun to be around good friends like Alan and Evie, who have welcomed me into their home. I'm here with my mentor, Dr. Martin. You'll see him a little later. But thank you. Appreciate everything you've done. Right now, I attend Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. I'm studying mass communications and political science. And sky's the limit right now. But it's going pretty fast, as Alan was going to tell me. I appreciate you all. Thank you. This is entitled Daisies. He loves me. He loves me not. I could tell you about a time when I was 7. It was a bright, early, beautiful Saturday afternoon, and my father was coming to pick me up at 4 o'clock for a day of father-son bonding. Around 3:15, I hopped in the shower, and as I began to wash myself with forgiveness, I couldn't help but wonder what I was in store for today. I got out of the shower, put on my hopeful shirt, my pants of pride, my shoes of unreasonable doubt, strapped on an anxious watch and sprayed on my cologne, that sweet smell of high expectation. Around 3:45, I went out on the stoop to sit and wait. My mind began to race left, right, back and forth. What was he going to do today? What was he up to today? My thought process was abruptly interrupted as a car pulled up in front of the house. That man pulled up in a 2005 Ford F-150. The honk of his horn lured me in like a pedophile on his next target. I say this to you because I had no idea who I was getting in the car with, but his pitch sounded good enough for me to trust him. I strapped in and he sped down the road. As I looked up and looked at his eyes, his light brown eyes, and his beard, his well-groomed beard, I couldn't help but grow anxious to look just like him. Even though I've been trying my entire life for him to just like me. but he loves me. He loves me not. Our first stop was the toy store, where he bought me a basketball. My first basketball. As I began to bounce the great sphere of orange leather, I couldn't help but absorb its mighty powers. Our second stop was the gym, where we played one-on-one 5 times. I won 4 times. I had to let him win the last time just to make him feel important. It brought me back to the days where he would show up one day out of the month just to make me feel important. One time he went up for a layup, and I fouled him as hard as I could. It brought me back to the times where he would come up to my mother and foul her as hard as he could, but he loves me. He loves me not. Our third stop was the movies, where we watched Shrek 2. The low, broken down seats of the theater made no difference as we sat and we watched and we laughed at every time Shrek yelled, "Donkey!" Our final stop was Wendy's, where he let me order anything I wanted on the menu. You see, I had to take advantage this time because I've never been able to have anything I've ever wanted with him. So today was going to be my day. I looked up at that menu and took pride in saying, "A 4-piece chicken nugget with sweet and sour sauce and a small Frosty, please, sir." As I grabbed my food, I sat down at the table and I looked up. And for the first time in my life, I saw love. I saw welcome. I saw a father. He loves me. Maybe this was it. It was finally over. Those days where I would sit by the phone and hope of him to call, or those days where I would go outside just to throw a ball up in the air and play catch with myself. Maybe it was finally over. Those days the church would have their father-son basketball tournaments and I would be the only one sitting out. Maybe my family and everybody around me would stop looking at me and yelling at me, "Your father is nothing but a piece of shit, Thomas." College. That man went back to jail, Thomas. He loves that crack pipe more than he loves you, Thomas. And sure, yeah, he canceled on me the first time and the second time and the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time and the sixth time and the seventh time, but he's here now. He cleared out his entire schedule today just so he could see me. He didn't get drunk today just so he could see me. He didn't shoot up today just so he could see me. He didn't cheat on my mother today just so he could see me. How thoughtful. Isn't it? Of course it is. What am I saying? I told everyone who ever doubted me. I told you, and I told you. He loves me. Finally, I can say that he loves me. Tommy, I could tell you about the day I awoke to look at my mother hovering over me, still sitting on my stoop. I then looked down at my anxious watch and died inside. 8:45 p.m. As tears ran down my face, my mother extended her arm and consoled me, and for the first time in my life, I understood that she was the only love I was ever going to get. My mind was made up, and I had ran all out of petals. He loves me not. Thank you.
wave now. Looked at your program, saw that our good friend Greg Kimura died about 2.5 weeks ago. Greg has been at this festival as a poet 3 times and as a spectator, I don't know how many, and he's made many good friends here. Had a brainstem tumor, didn't know what was going on for 2 years. They finally diagnosed it, and it was a relatively fast, over 6 months decline. So I want to read a little piece about him, and then a few people in the audience who become friends with Greg will say something too. It's an African proverb that says, when death finds you, may it find you alive. Texas Hill Country, enchanted rock, a huge grayish dome rising from the limestone. The climb up is gradual with occasional trills of the canyon wren, people going up and down like columns of ants. On a steeper stretch, my frontal vision is limited, a false horizon of rock, and a vulture flies out almost at eye level before veering upward, a sudden reminder that death waits just beyond our vision. My mind skips to a steaming day in Bombay, it was still Bombay back then, my geography's not off, almost 50 years ago, when I had a partial day's reprieve from my job on a passenger liner. My guide had taken me to the Tower of Silence, an open valley on the far reaches of town where the Parsis took their dead to be laid out to be consumed by the vultures. It seemed quite exotic to that 20-year-old boy who had seen little death in his life. But once the initial shock wore off, there was a feeling of what I could only call now rightness. Flesh literally returning to the natural world, its elements again being recycled into life. 5 days ago, my adopted brother Greg Kimura died after a prolonged decline caused by a brainstem tumor. It was not diagnosed for almost 2 years, and Greg gradually went from an athletic and physically vital man to a husk of his former self. Although puzzled by what was happening and losing strength, he continued to play tennis, hike, and kayak. We did 2 strenuous trips together in the Southwest Canyon country. Greg was a little slower and tired more easily, but was holding his own no matter what we did. When I saw him last August, he had lost more than 50 pounds and needed hiking poles to walk. We had talked, and I knew he was losing weight, but it took me aback to see how much he had declined. His diagnosis came a few days later, and we knew that death was imminent. 2001, Mendocino Woodlands Camp. Dusty sunbeams making their way through redwood cover, a cool breeze with the slightest tinge of salt. 100 men are arriving for a week-long conference and milling about. Some greet friends from past years, others introduce themselves to strangers. One man sits at a picnic table, alone, totally focused on maniacally writing. Strange, but oh well. 6 days later, our paths still have not crossed. He stands up during a session and reads a poem he has written. It is called Cargo, and it changes my life. I had just retired from 30 years of teaching 6th graders and had used the ideas found in Greg's poem to change my role from an instructor focused on getting students to spew out facts to an educator that wanted to expand their world by leading them out, the literal meaning of education, leading them out of their worldview and into one that stretched beyond anything they could imagine. I had been inspired by Malidoma Some, an African teacher from Burkina Faso. Cargo was dedicated to Malidoma. I approached Greg to thank him for his words and share a bit about how I too had benefited from Malidoma's teachings. We both continued to attend the annual event and over the next couple of years formed a strong bond. I invited him to Power of Poetry, a local festival I had begun in 2002. He came, read, and conquered, totally captivating the audience and making many new friends. He returned to the festival 2 more times as a presenter and almost every year to just be there to support the event. On one of these occasions, he helped me do the final edit on a poem I was presenting. I sit here today receiving consolation from its message, that the antidote for tragedy is putting beauty into the world, a basic part of what was Greg Kimura. The poem is called The Cellist of Sarajevo. Tommaso Albinoni could never have imagined Sarajevo as he crafted the notes of his adagio. The son of a wealthy man, he had no cares and devoted himself to music, a self-proclaimed dilettante, indulging himself in beauty. The adagio unfolds the listener, 7 minutes of deliberate playing, slowing the breath as the bow strokes the strings, the cello's voice, so human, words murmured behind a secret door. In the hell of Sarajevo, rumors of fresh bread, a connection to a normal world now so far away. They stood in anticipation, the smell so tantalizing, as the bakery disappeared in the blast of a mortar shell. For 22 days, one for each of these neighbors, he carried his cello to the crater, clad in black and white, music on the stand, amidst the snipers and the rubble, playing Albinoni's adagio for them and for himself, like Orpheus, descending on the music from the underworld of despair. Tommaso wrote music for the pure simple joy of it, but Vedran, descending in the adagio's minor chords to find the steady pulse, a precise and stately dance on the path leading out of hell. Dipping into the wells of practice, the waters of beauty seeping into his and our being. Every stroke, a conscious vote to return, every note, a step on the shattered path to life. That was in 1905, and the cellist of Sarajevo was the man who played for 22 days. People all over the world who were cellists played in sympathy at the same time every day. Over the years, our friendship continued to deepen, although sometimes I wondered how well he really knew me. He once called me for sartorial advice about what to wear for a wedding. Wrong number. Or when we had this conversation, Greg, I have a problem. Hey, Alan, concerned voice, what is it? Greg, I just met an amazing woman named Cheryl. Alan, so why is this a problem? Greg, because I have to tell all the other women I can't see them anymore. Alan, fuck you. And so it went, trading poems, having adventures, laughing, philosophizing, learning more and more about each other. He called me his 6th grade teacher, and many a time I had to threaten him with missing recess to get him to turn his work in on time. We began the Cargo Project, providing free posters of the Cargo poem with Evie's illustration to anyone wishing to have it, especially schools. We were close as brothers, and sometimes to me it felt like more, as we had chosen to do this. I could count on Greg for support and honest criticism when needed, and his quiet wisdom continued to amaze me. And then there's another little story here, but it's going to be told by the person who the story is about in a minute. As Greg's body faded, he stayed present, receiving and generating love. I never heard a complaint, only gratitude and appreciation for every moment. Long-term memories were evanescent wisps of smoke, and then even short-term ones became wobbly. But he reveled to be here and now, time a string of forever moments to be savored, then gracefully released. When we stop to think how much we've taken from the world during our life, we see what an immense gift we have received. The only way to even slightly repay our debt is to give ourselves as fully as we are able, sharing the cargo we carry with those who need it. If echoes of our deeds and ideas resound outward, they could reach those whose lives can be enriched from them, and it could be said that we walked well on this earth. Greg, my brother, your gifts are now part of me. I will do my best to perpetuate them, share them, and in doing so, keep your spirit alive. I'd like to invite Grant Carricker, our friend from Chicago, to come up and read a poem that Greg wrote, and you can explain a little about it.
Hi. So I feel somewhat a little not right to be reading something for someone who was very special to so many people, but as my grandma pointed out last night, Greg is someone that you will never forget just by meeting once. And I did only meet him once. And I have his poem in my bedroom, so I will always remember him. And I will always remember my grandma reading me this poem of his the first time. He wrote this on a weekend stay at their house right after the Boston Marathon bombings. It's called Jake the Dog. Saturday morning, and he lays his big shaggy head on the wooden floor just outside the guest bedroom where I sleep. And he waits. Waits for the one moment when I will open the door and we can welcome each other in our otherwise isolated lives. We've only met twice before, Jake and I, yet for this moment, he knows the world holds no meaning except this: to welcome and to be welcomed. To be pet, to be touched, to shake and shimmy and luxuriate in the presence of another. And I think on this bright Ohio morning, holding and stroking his excited furry body, of the young Boston man, a boxer, who saw no alternative but to recruit his brother and destroy, before he himself was destroyed. What if he knew what it was like to feel welcomed in this world? Jake and I walked down the stairs to his owners, 2 days ago strangers to me, but now friends who welcome with words and cups of hot tea. My mind goes back to the boxer. What if Jake, or me, or some other bodhisattvas, canine or otherwise, had given him such welcomes? 1,000 thank yous, Greg.
I'd like to invite Wendy McVicker up here. Wendy was our poet the first year that Greg came, and got to know him then.
Seems to be a mic that picks up. Thank you. So, I think I met Greg when this festival was still at the Logan Library. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And it's been 15 years, is that right? Wow, okay. And I remember the year that Greg and I and Karen White were the poets. And what, I think we were like teenagers, you know, with our excited energy about doing this together. I remember dashing in and out of the restroom to make sure the hair was combed right and all that. And Greg was a man for me. I didn't know him well, but I always associate him with this festival of sparkle and shine. He had such warmth, and he had sparkle, and that lives on, that will live on. Thank you, Greg.
Tricia Lockman. Just undo it.
Hi. I came for the first time to Power of Poetry in 2006. So I didn't know anybody at all, except the person I came with, which is Wendy. And right in the middle of the first part of the event, my cell phone went off. I mean, loudly. And I was horrified and ran out of the building. Well, you know, those were the days when cell phones were just kind of making their appearance, and I certainly didn't want to be spoiling an event with such a call. But I got outside, and it was my husband calling from Philadelphia, and my mother-in-law. It was my husband saying that my mother-in-law had just died. She was age 98. And I was outside of that building feeling really, really sad because she had been such a mother to me. And my mother had died very young of cancer, so I didn't, you know, besides my mother-in-law, I hadn't experienced that closeness so much. Anyway, I'm outside of the building, and eventually I think Wendy came out, and maybe Greg too. I don't remember when Greg came into the picture exactly, but I didn't know him. And he heard what had happened, and he was right away communicating such empathy and such loving kindness toward me. And he said, "You have to come back in." And he asked that of the other poets that were there, if we could focus for the next while on a memorial for my mother-in-law, Anna. And in fact, the poets that were there with poems about death and dying read, and it was so supportive to me, and I felt so wonderful that a group of strangers were providing such a deep experience for me on that day. So it was really wonderful, and I loved the fact that Greg had brought that to pass. And I felt a connection with him from then on, and I happened to have a daughter that was based in San Francisco at that time, so every time I would go out to see her, I would try to make contact with Greg, and sometimes I would go to his poetry group, and sometimes we would do other kinds of things in the city and take hikes and whatnot. And you know, his last time I met with him, I was with another group of people. It was a woman my age and her teenage niece, and we couldn't connect the whole time until the very last moment when we were flying back. And here comes Greg appearing at the airport, sitting with us for the hour that we were waiting for our plane, and creating the jolliest scene you can ever imagine. And so, you know, he's really a compassionate person, a visionary person. I read his poem Cargo at the passing of my dad in 2015, and I just feel like he helped me to remember how much cargo we are given and how much we have to give away. Thank you.
At last report, there was a battle going on of who's going to read Cargo. So it's either Mickey or Robin. You're going to do it. It's Mickey, our expert decorator.
Mickey won.
Battle still goes on.
Robin wanted to make sure that the poem got read, and I offered to let her do it. She said I must have practiced and rehearsed it, which I maybe did a little bit, but yeah. So we'll see. As folks were talking, I recalled a couple things, and the first is some people smile, and some people smile with their whole face, including their eyes, and Greg smiled with his eyes. And I think that may have been some of the sparkle you were talking about, Wendy, that he just, and you couldn't help but smile when he was around because he was smiling. And so there's that. The other thing that is, as folks were talking about with this event, you know, sometimes folks will ask me, do you need some help? How can I help? Greg just helped. He just pitched in and just did what needed to be done, and to me that was a real treat. Cargo. You enter life, a ship laden with meaning, purpose, and gifts, sent to be delivered to a hungry world. And as much as the world needs your cargo, you need to give it away. Everything depends on this. But the world forgets its needs, and you forget your mission. And the ancestral maps used to guide you have become faded scrolls of parchment of dead pharaohs. The cargo weighs you heavy the longer it is held, and spoilage becomes a risk. Your ship sputters from port to port, and at each you ask, is this the way? But the way cannot be found without knowing your cargo, and the cargo cannot be known without recognizing that there is a way. And it is simply this: you have gifts. The world needs your gifts. You must deliver them. The world may not know it is starving, but the hungry know, and they will find you when you discover your cargo and start to give it away.
There are cargo posters on the table. Take some to give to people that need them. And there's a website on there that has a lot of great essays and information for teachers. So Evie did the drawing and Greg did the poem, and it's a really good combination. To finish the first half of this program tonight, I want to share a poem by David Lee. He wrote it for his friend Bill Clefcorn, and Dave knew and loved Greg too, and I'm sure that it's fine to use this. The poem is called Last Call. Oh, I wanted to say one thing. There's a word in here that I didn't know. It's candent. It means like glowing from inside, and that helps understand. The poem is called Last Call, and he says the two saddest words in the English language from a conversation with Bill Clefcorn, and I told him I beg to differ. I thought the two saddest words in the English language are mother-in-law's coming. Tonight, moon glow from within softly like a candled egg, and softly stars diminish until incandescence washes the dark sky, until midnight's light slick, its ebb and flow liquid, the candent universe rolls softly. Midnight remonstrance. There are those I wish honestly only to remember being gone and only memory, and there are those I wish to never remember, desiring only their presence, lasting as long as my life, until forever, as I cannot imagine living in a world containing only their memory. And you, my friend, whom the gods call into that other alone, wherever you wake, be it desert or forest, mountain or seaside, find tinder, dry moss and kindling, flint. Strike a small fire, which being eternity will flicker beyond forever. Sing your bright poem, fork your lightning dance. I will find you sooner than later, wherever you wait in that darkness. We will sing together, delirious and off-key. We will tell great lies to shame the heavens. We will cook with wine. I promise you this. So we'll have a short intermission, and then we'll be back for the poets. Thank you.